In Season 6, Episode 1, Wake Up, there is a moment that lasts less than 10 seconds and changes the entire show. Finn the human looks at his father for the first time. Martin Mertens is standing in the Citadel, a cosmic prison surrounded by the worst criminals in the universe. And Finn's face does something the show has never let it do before. It goes blank. Not sad, not angry, not confused. Blank. The face of a boy who has just realized that the thing he wanted most in the world is not what he thought it would be. The animators held that expression for exactly 3 frames longer than necessary. You almost miss it. But if you catch it, you understand something about Finn that takes the rest of the series to explain. That moment is not the beginning of Finn's philosophy, but it is the moment when the show stops pretending that Finn does not have one. Everything before that moment is Finn as a hero. Everything after it is Finn as a person. And the difference between a hero and a person is the difference between knowing what to do and wondering whether doing anything matters at all. That is what this is about. Not Finn's adventures, not his battles, not his romances or his friendships or his long list of accomplishments. This is about what Finn thinks, about what Finn believes, about the philosophy that lives underneath the punching, underneath the quests, underneath the hat and the sword, and the dog in the treehouse. Finn the human is the most philosophically complex character in animation, and almost nobody talks about him that way because he is also a boy who punches monsters. But the punching and the philosophy are not separate things. They are the same thing expressed in different registers. And if you stay with me long enough, you will see how. Before we go any further, subscribing to PieNat genuinely helps us keep making these long, quiet videos. It takes about 3 seconds and it costs nothing. Now, let us begin with the first and most fundamental question Finn's entire life is built on. The question that defines Finn from his very first appearance in the pilot episode to his final moments in Together Again is this. What does it mean to be good? Not in the abstract, not as a concept debated in a university seminar. What does it mean, practically, in the moment, when you are standing in front of something that is hurting someone and you have to decide what to do about it? Finn starts the series with a simple answer. Being good means fighting evil. Evil is obvious. Evil has a face, usually an ugly one, and a plan, usually involving kidnapping a princess. Being good means stopping that plan. Being good means punching that face. The moral universe of early Adventure Time is as clear as a fairy tale. There are heroes, there are villains. The hero's job is to protect the innocent and defeat the wicked, and the hero does not need to wonder whether the wicked might have a point, because the wicked are wicked and that is the end of the conversation. This is the moral framework of a child, and the show knows it, and the show loves it, and the show is also building the machinery that will tear it apart. Consider how the show introduces its first complication. The Ice King is the villain of the early seasons. He kidnaps princesses, he is creepy and pathetic and vaguely threatening. Finn fights him, Finn defeats him, Finn rescues the princesses. The moral calculus is clean, but then, across dozens of episodes spread over multiple seasons, the show reveals who the Ice King actually is. He is Simon Petrikov, he was a scholar, he was kind, he was engaged to a woman named Betty who loved him, and the crown he wears, the source of his power and his madness, was something he put on to save a little girl during the apocalypse. The Ice King is not evil. The Ice King is sick. The Ice King is a good man trapped inside a bad enchantment, and the things Finn has been punching are the symptoms of a disease, not the choices of a villain. This revelation does not happen all at once. It happens slowly, episode by episode, detail by detail, until one day Finn is standing in front of the Ice King and he cannot punch, not because he is weak, because the punch no longer makes moral sense. You do not punch a sick person. You do not defeat an illness by hitting it. The tool Finn has been using, the only tool he knows, is suddenly useless. And that moment, the moment when the hero's primary skill becomes irrelevant, is the moment when philosophy begins. Philosophy begins when the easy answers stop working. That is true in life, and it is true in Adventure Time. Finn's moral development is not a smooth upward curve. It is a series of collapses. Each collapse happens when a previously reliable moral framework fails to account for a new situation. Each collapse forces Finn to build a new framework, and each new framework is more complex than the last. And each more complex framework will eventually fail too. And the process of building and breaking and rebuilding is the process the show uses to move Finn from a child's understanding of right and wrong to something much closer to an adult's. The first major collapse is the Ice King revelation. The second is his father. The third is Flame Princess. And each one teaches Finn a different philosophical lesson, not through lectures or monologues, but through the experience of being wrong. The Ice King teaches Finn that evil is not always a choice. Some people are cruel because they are broken. Some people hurt others because they are in pain. And the appropriate response to a broken person is not combat. It is compassion. But compassion is harder than combat, because combat has a clear endpoint. Someone wins and someone loses. And compassion does not. You can defeat a villain and the story is over. You cannot cure a sick man and the story continues. And the continuing is the hard part, because the sick man will keep being sick and you will keep having to choose compassion over violence. And the choice never gets easier because the sickness never fully goes away. Finn's relationship with the Ice King is his first encounter with the philosophical concept of moral tragedy. A moral tragedy is not a story where someone does something wrong. It is a story where there is no right thing to do. Simon cannot take off the crown because the crown is keeping him alive. Finn cannot destroy the crown because destroying the crown would kill Simon. Marceline cannot save Simon because Simon's salvation would require him to remember her, and remembering her would mean remembering everything he lost, and that grief might be worse than the madness. There is no solution. There is only the situation, and learning to sit with a situation that has no solution is one of the hardest philosophical skills a person can develop. Finn develops this skill slowly, reluctantly, imperfectly. He never fully accepts the Ice King situation. He keeps trying to fix it. He keeps believing that there must be an answer, that heroism must be able to solve this, that if he just tries hard enough, or finds the right artifact, or says the right words, Simon will come back. And the show lets him try. And the show lets him fail, and each failure teaches Finn a little more about the limits of heroism, and each lesson about the limits of heroism is a lesson about the limits of the simple moral framework he started with. This is existentialism as practiced by a cartoon. Existentialism, at its core, is the philosophy of living without certainty. It is the philosophy that says, there is no predetermined right answer. There is no cosmic script that tells you what to do. You are free, terrifyingly free, to make your own choices. And the freedom is the hardest part because it means you cannot blame anyone else when you choose wrong. And Finn, across the 10 seasons of Adventure Time, goes from a boy who believes the universe has a moral script to a young man who knows it does not, and who chooses to be good anyway, not because the universe tells him to, but because he has decided for himself that being good is what he wants to do. That decision, the decision to be good in a universe that does not require goodness, is the philosophical core of the entire show. And it is a decision Finn has to make over and over again, because each new situation presents a new version of the question, and the answer is never the same twice. Martin Mertens teaches Finn a different lesson. The Ice King taught Finn that evil can be the result of illness. Martin teaches Finn that evil can be the result of indifference. Martin is not a supervillain. He does not have a plan to destroy the world. He does not cackle or monologue or scheme. He is in many ways the most realistic villain in the entire show, because what Martin does is simply not care. He does not care about Finn. He does not care about the harm he causes. He does not care about the people he uses or the promises he breaks or the lives he disrupts. He is a narcissist in the clinical sense, a person whose internal world is so completely self-referential that other people exist only as instruments of his convenience. Finn's encounter with Martin is the show's engagement with the philosophy of the absurd. Albert Camus wrote that the fundamental question of philosophy is whether life is worth living. Finn encounters this question at age 15, when the father he spent his entire childhood imagining turns out to be a con man who abandons him without hesitation. The father does not even have the decency to be dramatically evil. He is boringly, casually, unremarkably selfish. And the ordinariness of his selfishness is what makes it devastating, because Finn was prepared for a villain. The arm is the physical marker of this philosophical moment. When Martin escapes the Citadel, he tears Finn's arm off, not deliberately, as a byproduct of his escape. Martin does not even notice that he has maimed his son. The arm loss is not a battle wound. It is a casualty of indifference, and the show understands the symbolism perfectly. Finn's right arm is his sword arm. It is the instrument of his heroism, and it is taken from him not by an enemy, but by a parent. The message is clear. The people closest to you can do more damage than any villain, and the damage they do is not the kind you can fight your way out of. After losing his arm, Finn enters a period the show does not shy away from depicting honestly. He is depressed, he is angry, he is numb. In the episode Breezy, he kisses princess after princess, trying to feel something, anything, and each kiss leaves him emptier than the one before. This is not a kid's show glossing over trauma. This is a kid's show walking directly into trauma and saying, this is what it looks like. This is what it feels like. And there is no quick fix. The philosophical significance of Finn's depression arc is that it introduces the concept of suffering without purpose. In the earlier seasons, Finn's suffering always had a narrative function. He suffered in order to grow. He experienced pain in order to learn lessons. His hardships were investments that paid off in character development. But the depression after Martin has no narrative payoff. It does not make Finn stronger. It does not teach him a useful lesson. It simply hurts. It hurts and it keeps hurting, and the only thing that eventually makes it stop hurting is time. And even time does not fully heal it. It just makes the hurting bearable rather than constant. This is the show's most mature philosophical statement. Suffering does not always have a purpose. Sometimes bad things happen and they do not make you stronger. Sometimes you lose something and the loss does not teach you anything. Sometimes you are just damaged, and the damage is just damage, and you have to figure out how to live with it, because no one is going to come along and explain why it happened or what it was for. This is not nihilism, it is realism, and the fact that Finn keeps going, keeps adventuring, keeps trying to be good, after experiencing purposeless suffering, is the show's argument that meaning does not come from the universe. Meaning comes from the decision to keep going. The decision to be good is meaningful precisely because it is made in a universe that does not guarantee that goodness will be rewarded or that suffering will be justified. The Flame Princess arc introduces the philosophical problem that Finn is least equipped to handle, and it is the problem of love as a moral hazard. Finn meets Flame Princess in Season 3 and falls for her immediately. She is beautiful, she is powerful, she is dangerous. She is literally on fire, and the show uses the fire as the central metaphor. Loving someone who can hurt you just by being who they are. Flame Princess does not choose to burn things. She burns things because she is fire. Her destructive capacity is not a character flaw. It is her nature. And the question the show poses to Finn is, can you love someone whose nature is incompatible with your own? Can you love someone you cannot touch? Finn's answer for a long time is yes. If you are clever enough, he builds fireproof shelters. He wears protective gear. He finds workarounds. He engineers solutions to the problem of their physical incompatibility. And these solutions work for a while. But the show is not telling a story about engineering solutions. It is telling a story about what happens when you treat a person as a problem to be solved. The crisis comes in Frost and Fire, the episode where Finn manipulates Flame Princess and Ice King into fighting each other because he had a dream where they fought and found the conflict exciting. Finn lies to both of them. He orchestrates a battle between two people he claims to care about because the battle fulfills a need he cannot articulate, a need for drama, for intensity, for the thrill of watching powerful forces collide. And when Flame Princess discovers the manipulation, she leaves him. She does not scream, she does not burn anything, she simply says, "You are not who I thought you were," and she walks away. This is the show's most sophisticated treatment of the philosopher Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative, though it never names it as such. Kant argued that the fundamental moral law is this: treat other people as ends in themselves, never merely as means to an end. Finn violated this principle with Flame Princess. He treated her as a means to an end. The end was his own emotional stimulation. He wanted the drama, he wanted the intensity, and he used Flame Princess to get it, treating her not as a person with her own desires and dignity, but as an instrument of his entertainment. The genius of this arc is that Finn does not understand what he did wrong until long after the damage is done. He apologizes, he tries to make it right, but the apology does not fix it, because the violation was not an action that can be undone. It was a revelation about who Finn is, or at least who Finn was at that moment. Flame Princess did not leave Finn because he did something bad. She left because he showed her something about himself that she could not accept, that he was capable of treating her as an object, and that revelation, once made, cannot be unmade. You cannot unsee the truth about someone, and the truth Flame Princess saw was that Finn, for all his heroism, for all his courage, for all his genuine desire to be good, was also capable of treating the people he loved as tools. This is the philosophical concept of moral luck. Moral luck is the idea that whether you are judged as a good or bad person often depends on circumstances beyond your control. Finn's manipulation of Flame Princess was not dramatically different from many other things he did throughout the series. He lied, he schemed, he took risks with other people's safety, but those other lies and schemes and risks happened to work out. Nobody got hurt. Finn was lucky. With Flame Princess, the luck ran out. The same moral carelessness that had been harmless in other contexts turned out to be devastating in this one. And the lesson is, your moral character is not defined by the times your mistakes are consequence-free. It is defined by what happens when your mistakes have consequences. Finn absorbs this lesson slowly. He does not become a perfect person after the Flame Princess breakup. He does not suddenly develop the emotional maturity to treat every person he meets as an end in themselves. But He begins the process. He begins to notice when he is using someone. He begins to check his own motivations. He begins to ask, before acting, whether the action he is about to take respects the dignity of the people it affects. And this process of self-examination, this habit of moral reflection, is the foundation of ethical philosophy, not the answers, the habit of asking the questions. The fourth major philosophical crisis of Finn's life is the Finn sword, and by extension Fern, and this is where the show engages with the hardest problem in personal identity. What makes you you? The Finn sword is created in Season 6 when Finn and Jake enter an alternate timeline and the Finn from that timeline is trapped inside a sword. The sword is Finn, not a copy of Finn, not a simulation. It is a version of Finn whose consciousness was compressed into a blade. And the main timeline Finn carries this sword for dozens of episodes, using a version of himself as a weapon. Stop and think about what this means. Finn is swinging himself at monsters. Finn is stabbing villains with a weapon that is also himself. The show never lingers on this. It presents the Finn sword as cool, as a power-up, as a neat plot device. But the philosophical implications are staggering. If the Finn inside the sword is Finn, then Finn is using a version of himself as an instrument. He is violating the Kantian imperative against himself. He is treating a person who happens to be him, as a mere means to an end. When the Finn sword becomes Fern, the implications deepen. Fern has Finn's memories, Finn's personality, Finn's values. Fern believes he is Finn, and when Fern encounters the original Finn, he faces a crisis that philosophy calls the problem of personal identity. If two beings have identical memories, identical personalities, and identical claims to the same identity, which one is the real one? The answer, as the show presents it, is that the question is wrong. There is no real Finn. There are versions of Finn. And the versions are not ranked by authenticity. They are different expressions of the same underlying pattern, and each expression has its own validity, and the tragedy of Fern is not that he is a copy, but that he believes he needs to be the original in order to matter. The show resolves Fern's arc by having him sacrifice himself and become a tree. This resolution is philosophically significant because it is the show's answer to the identity problem. Fern stops trying to be Finn. He stops trying to prove he is the real one. He accepts that he is something else, something new, something that grew from Finn but is not Finn. And in that acceptance, he finds peace. The philosophical lesson is, identity is not a fixed point. It is a process. You are not a single unchanging self. You are a series of selves, each one growing from the previous one, each one valid, each one temporary. And the peace comes not from finding the real you, but from accepting that there is no real you, that there are only the versions of you that exist in each moment, and each version is complete. This is remarkably close to Buddhist philosophy, specifically the concept of anatta, or no self. Buddhism holds that the self is an illusion. There is no permanent, unchanging essence that constitutes who you are. What you call yourself is actually a constantly shifting collection of experiences, thoughts, sensations, and patterns, none of which is more you than any other. Fern's arc is the animated version of this teaching. Fern suffers because he clings to an identity. He suffers because he believes he must be Finn, and he finds peace only when he lets go of the need to be anyone in particular and allows himself to be what he is. A tree, not Finn, not a copy, just a living thing growing in the place where it was planted. Finn himself goes through a less dramatic but equally significant version of this process across the series. At 12, Finn is certain about who he is. He is a hero. He is the last human. He is the kid with the sword. His identity is a fixed point. By 17, Finn is less certain. He has been a hero and a failure. He has been kind and cruel. He has been brave and afraid. He has been Finn and also the Blue Catalyst Comet and also Shoko and also a butterfly. His identity is not a fixed point anymore. It is a constellation. And the show's final statement on Finn in Together Again is that even death does not collapse the constellation into a single point. Finn dies and his soul continues. And the soul is not Finn in the way that a body is Finn. The soul is the pattern that Finn expressed, and the pattern will express itself again, through Shermie or through whoever comes after Shermie. And each expression will be different, and each expression will be complete. This is the most profound philosophical claim the show makes, that you are not who you think you are, and that is not a tragedy. That is a liberation. The pressure to be a consistent, coherent, unchanging self is a prison. And the show frees Finn from that prison by showing him, over 10 seasons, that the self he was clinging to was never the point. The point was the pattern. The point was the tendency toward goodness, the impulse to help, the willingness to try even when trying hurts. Those things do not belong to a self. They belong to a soul. and a soul is bigger than any single life. There is another dimension to Finn's philosophy that the show develops quietly, almost invisibly, across the full run of the series, and it is the philosophy of violence. Finn hits things. That is his primary skill. He is a warrior. He carries a sword, he punches, kicks, slashes, and battles his way through hundreds of episodes. And for the first few seasons, the show treats this violence as uncomplicated. Finn fights bad guys. Bad guys deserve to be fought. Violence is the tool of the hero, and the hero uses it well. But the show begins to question this framework almost as soon as it establishes it. The questioning starts small. In Memories of Boom Boom Mountain, one of the earliest episodes, Finn encounters a crying mountain. The mountain is crying because it can see the other mountain's butt. The solution is not violence. The solution is building a wall. This is played for comedy, but the philosophical point is real. Not every problem can be solved by hitting it. Some problems require construction rather than destruction. Some problems require patience rather than force. And the hero who can only hit things is a hero who is helpless in front of any problem that does not have a face to punch. Finn's growing awareness of the limits of violence is one of the show's most sustained philosophical arguments. In Season 4, the episode Goliad introduces a creature with psychic powers who cannot be defeated by physical force. In Season 5, Finn tries to use violence against his father and loses his arm. In Season 6, Finn encounters the Comet, a cosmic entity that offers him transcendence, and the Comet cannot be fought because the Comet is not an enemy. It is a question. You cannot fight a question with a sword. Each of these encounters strips away another layer of Finn's reliance on violence, and what is left when the violence is stripped away is the real Finn. The Finn who sits with the Ice King and does not punch. The Finn who forgives Flame Princess even though forgiveness is harder than anger. The Finn who lets his father go even though letting go feels like defeat. The Finn who turns down cosmic power and says, with a kind of bewildered honesty, that he feels like he has put a lot of work into this meat reality and would like to see it through. That line, spoken by Finn to the Catalyst Comet in the Season 6 finale The Comet, is the single most important line in the entire series. It is Finn's existentialist manifesto. It is Finn's Camus moment. Camus wrote that the fundamental question is whether life is worth living, and Finn answers it, yes. Not because life is perfect, not because life is fair, not because the universe has a plan or because suffering has a purpose, but because Finn has put work into being alive, and the work itself has value. And the value of the work does not depend on anything outside of Finn. The value comes from inside. The value comes from the decision to invest, to care, to show up, to keep going. Life is worth living because Finn chooses to live it. That is the entire argument. That is the entire philosophy. And it is enough. The show understands that this argument only works if Finn has genuinely suffered. An untested person who says life is worth living is making a prediction. A tested person who says life is worth living is making a report. Finn has been tested. He has lost his arm, his father, his girlfriend, his innocence, his certainty, his moral compass, and several versions of himself. He has experienced purposeless pain. He has been depressed. He has been manipulated. He has been abandoned by the person who was supposed to love him most. And after all of that, standing in front of a cosmic entity that is offering him a way out, a way to stop being Finn and become something beyond suffering, Finn says no. He says, I want to stay. I want to keep being the thing that hurts and fails and tries and sometimes gets it right. I want this meat reality, this imperfect, painful, bewildering, beautiful meat reality. If you take nothing else from this video, take that. The most philosophically important moment in Adventure Time is a teenage boy turning down godhood because he has decided that being human is more interesting than being infinite. Every philosopher who has ever written about the meaning of life is trying to say what Finn says in that scene. The meaning of life is not given to you, it is made by you. And the making is messy and painful and uncertain and sometimes pointless, and always, always, always worth the effort. There is a through line in Finn's philosophy that connects his understanding of good and evil, his experience of suffering, his crisis of identity, and his relationship with violence. And the through line is this: growth requires loss. Every stage of Finn's philosophical development is triggered by losing something he believed he could not live without. He loses the certainty that the Ice King is evil. He loses the fantasy of a loving father. He loses Flame Princess. He loses his arm. He loses versions of himself. He loses the simple moral framework that made the world understandable. And each loss makes him better. Not immediately, not painlessly, but eventually. The loss of certainty about the Ice King gives Finn compassion. The loss of the father fantasy gives Finn self-reliance. The loss of Flame Princess gives Finn moral self-awareness. The loss of his arm gives Finn humility. The loss of his simple moral framework gives Finn the capacity for moral complexity. Each loss is a subtraction that produces an addition. Each loss takes away something Finn thought he needed and replaces it with something Finn actually needs. This is Hegelian dialectics in cartoon form. Hegel argued that progress happens through a process of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. You start with a belief. The belief encounters a contradiction. The contradiction destroys the belief. And from the wreckage of the destroyed belief, a new belief emerges that incorporates both the original belief and the contradiction. The new belief is more complex, more nuanced, more capable of handling reality than the old one. But the new belief will also eventually encounter its own contradiction, and the process will repeat, and the process is infinite. Finn's moral development follows this pattern exactly. Thesis: evil is obvious and can be defeated by violence. Antithesis: the Ice King is not evil but sick. Synthesis: some enemies need compassion, not combat. But then the synthesis becomes a new thesis. New thesis: compassion can fix broken people. Antithesis: Martin is not broken, he is indifferent. Compassion cannot fix indifference. New synthesis: some people cannot be saved, and the hero's job is not to save everyone, but to choose whom to help and accept whom he cannot. Each cycle of this dialectic takes Finn further from his original simplicity, and closer to something the show never names but which philosophy calls practical wisdom. Practical wisdom is Aristotle's term for the ability to perceive the morally salient features of a situation and respond appropriately. It is not a set of rules, it is a capacity. It is the ability to walk into a room, read the situation, understand what matters, and do the right thing, not because you have been taught what the right thing is, but because you have developed the judgment to figure it out on your own. Finn at 17 has practical wisdom. Finn at 12 did not. And the journey from 12 to 17 is the journey from rules to judgment, from obedience to discernment, from certainty to wisdom. It is the journey the show traces across 10 seasons, and it is the journey that makes Finn the Human one of the most complete philosophical characters in the history of animated television. The philosophy of Finn's relationships deserves its own attention because it is in his relationships that Finn's abstract philosophical development becomes concrete and visible. Consider Finn's relationship with Jake. Jake is Finn's brother, best friend, partner, and in many ways, his philosophical opposite. Finn is driven. Jake is content. Finn seeks meaningless. Finn fights against the universe's indifference. Jake shrugs at it. Finn is an existentialist. Jake is a Taoist. The Taoist concept of wu-wei, or non-action, is Jake's natural mode of being. Wu-wei does not mean doing nothing. It means acting without forcing. It means flowing with the natural course of events, rather than struggling against them. Jake stretches to fit whatever situation he is in. Jake does not resist change. Jake does not fight entropy. Jake accepts the world as it is, in real time, and adapts to it with an ease that Finn finds both admirable and maddening. The philosophical tension between Finn and Jake is the tension between two legitimate responses to the absurdity of existence. Finn responds with struggle. Jake responds with acceptance. Finn tries to make the world better. Jake tries to make himself comfortable in the world as it is. Neither approach is wrong, neither approach is complete, and the show's argument, played out across hundreds of episodes, is that both approaches are necessary. A world full of Finns would be exhausting. Everyone fighting, everyone striving, everyone trying to impose meaning on chaos. A world full of Jakes would be inert. Everyone accepting, everyone adapting, everyone floating along with whatever happens. You need both. You need the fighter and the floater. You need the existentialist and the Taoist. And the fact that they are brothers, that they live in the same treehouse, that they go on every adventure together, is the show's way of saying these two philosophies are not rivals, they are family. Finn's relationship with Marceline introduces a different philosophical dimension, the philosophy of time. Marceline is 1,000 years old. She has watched civilizations rise and fall. She has loved people and outlived them. She has experienced the full weight of what Heidegger called being toward death, the awareness that existence is finite and that every moment is shadowed by the fact of eventual ending. Except that Marceline's existence is not finite. She is immortal, and her immortality does not free her from the awareness of death. It intensifies it, because Marceline is not dying, but everyone she loves is. She lives in a permanent state of anticipatory grief, always knowing that the people she cares about will leave her, not by choice, but by mortality. Finn's friendship with Marceline is the show's exploration of how a mortal and an immortal relate to each other. Finn does not understand Marceline's grief because he cannot imagine outliving everyone he knows. Marceline does not fully understand Finn's urgency because she has all the time in the world and he does not. But they connect anyway. Not through understanding, but through presence. They spend time together. They make music. They talk about things that do not matter. And in those moments, the difference between mortal and immortal disappears. Because the present moment does not belong to time. The present moment belongs to whoever is in it. And in the present moment, Finn and Marceline are equals. The 1,000-year gap between them collapses into nothing, because the gap only exists in the past and the future, and the present is where connection lives. This is the show's most subtle philosophical claim about time, that time is not a line. Time is a series of moments, and the quality of a life is not determined by how many moments it contains, but by how fully each moment is inhabited. Marceline has more moments than Finn will ever have. But Finn inhabits each of his moments with an intensity that Marceline, dulled by centuries of repetition, sometimes struggles to match. And the question the show leaves open is, which is better? More moments or better moments? A long life lived at medium intensity or a short life lived at full volume? The show does not answer this question. It presents both options and lets you sit with them. And the sitting, the not knowing, the accepting that there may not be an answer, is itself a philosophical practice. It is the practice of negative capability, a term coined by the poet John Keats to describe the ability to be comfortable with uncertainty, to remain in doubt without reaching for a resolution. Finn develops negative capability over the course of the series. He starts as a boy who needs answers. He ends as a young man who can live with questions. And the distance between needing answers and living with questions is the distance between a child and a philosopher. Finn's relationship with Princess Bubblegum introduces the philosophy of power. Bubblegum is the ruler of the Candy Kingdom. She is a scientist, a politician, a creator of life, and a benevolent dictator. She is also, in many respects, the most morally ambiguous character in the show. She conducts surveillance on her citizens. She creates life forms with limited cognitive capacity. She makes unilateral decisions about the safety and governance of her kingdom without consulting anyone. She is, depending on your perspective, either the wisest leader in Ooo or the most dangerous. Finn's relationship with Bubblegum is complicated by the fact that Finn has a crush on her for much of the early series. He admires her, he wants to impress her, he defers to her judgment, and the show uses this dynamic to explore the philosophical question of how power distorts relationships. Bubblegum does not manipulate Finn deliberately, but her power creates an asymmetry in their relationship that makes genuine equality impossible. Finn cannot disagree with Bubblegum because disagreeing with Bubblegum feels like betraying someone he admires. And Bubblegum cannot fully respect Finn's autonomy because she is accustomed to making decisions for everyone, and Finn is part of everyone. The show resolves this tension by having Finn outgrow his crush. As Finn matures, he begins to see Bubblegum not as an idol, but as a person. He begins to notice her flaws. He begins to question her decisions. He begins to develop his own moral framework that is independent of her approval. And this process, the process of moving from admiration to assessment, from worship to respect, is one of the most important philosophical transitions a person can make. Because worship is easy. Worship is comfortable. Worship means you never have to think for yourself because someone else is doing the thinking for you. But worship is also a form of surrender. And Finn, who has spent the entire series learning to think for himself, eventually surrenders the last of his intellectual dependencies and stands on his own. The final philosophical dimension of Finn's character is his relationship with death. Death in Adventure Time is not a single event. It is a recurring theme, a constant presence, a philosophical interlocutor that Finn engages with repeatedly across the series. Finn's most direct encounter with death comes in the Together Again special, where Finn, now an old man, dies and enters the afterlife to find Jake. The afterlife is structured as a series of dead worlds, numbered 1 through 50, each one representing a different level of spiritual attainment. Jake is in the 50th dead world, the deepest level, the place of total peace. Finn is in the first, and Finn's journey through the dead worlds to reach Jake is the show's final philosophical statement. The distance between where you are and where you want to be is not a spatial distance. It is a spiritual distance. And the journey is not about moving through space. It is about moving through understanding. Each dead world Finn passes through represents a stage of coming to terms with death. Some dead worlds are angry, some are sad, some are denial, some are bargaining. The show does not map them directly onto the Kubler-Ross stages of grief, but the echo is intentional. Finn is processing his own death as he moves through the worlds. He is learning in real time what it means to not be alive anymore. And the learning is difficult because Finn is Finn. And Finn does not accept things easily. He fights. He resists. He tries to punch his way through the afterlife the same way he punched his way through life, and it works, sort of, in the same way it always worked. Imperfectly, messily, with a lot of collateral damage and a few moments of genuine grace. When Finn finally reaches Jake in the 50th Dead World, the reunion is quiet. There are no explosions. There are no epic battles. There are two brothers sitting together the way they always sat together, in the treehouse, on the couch, doing nothing in particular. And the doing nothing is the point. The philosophy of that moment is presence is enough. You do not need to accomplish anything. You do not need to defeat anything. You do not need to mean anything. You just need to be there with the person you love, in the moment you are in. That is enough. That has always been enough. And then Finn makes his final philosophical choice. He and Jake choose to be reincarnated. They choose to go back. They choose to leave the peace of the 50th Dead World and re-enter the cycle of birth, life, death, and suffering. They choose meet reality again. And the choice is not desperate. It is not clingy. It is joyful. They choose to go back because they love being alive so much that even the knowledge that life includes suffering does not dissuade them. They have been to the end. They have seen what comes after. And they choose the before. They choose the struggle. They choose the mess. They choose each other, and the treehouse, and the adventures, and the mornings, and the evenings, and the quiet moments between the loud ones. That choice is Finn's final philosophical statement, and it is the statement the show has been building towards since the pilot. Life is not a problem to be solved. Life is an experience to be had, and the having is worth the hurting, and the hurting is worth the having. And the cycle, the endless cycle of beginning and ending and beginning again, is not a curse. It is a gift. The gift of another chance. The gift of another morning. The gift of another adventure. In another body. In another time. With the same soul and the same brother and the same stubborn, beautiful, irrational refusal to stop. There is a concept in moral philosophy called the moral imagination. And it is the concept that best explains what happens to Finn between Season 1 and Season 10. Moral imagination is the ability to see situations from perspectives other than your own. It is the ability to understand that other people have inner lives as complex and valid as yours. It is the ability to stand inside someone else's experience, even briefly, even imperfectly, and use what you see there to inform your own moral decisions. Finn at 12 has almost no moral imagination. He divides the world into good guys and bad guys. Good guys are people who are like him. Bad guys are people who are not. His moral universe has a population of one, himself, multiplied outward into a world of allies and enemies. He does not wonder what the Ice King feels. He does not ask what Marceline remembers. He does not consider whether the monsters he fights might have families. He acts, and his actions are driven by a moral certainty that is absolute and therefore brittle. The brittleness is the important part. Moral certainty feels strong. It feels like armor. It feels like the thing that lets you walk into danger without hesitating. But moral certainty is actually fragile because it depends on the world being simpler than it is. The moment the world reveals its complexity, moral certainty shatters. And the shattering is what happens to Finn, repeatedly, across the series. Each encounter with a morally complex situation, the Ice King's illness, Martin's indifference, Flame Princess's nature, Fern's identity, is a hammer blow against the armor of certainty. And each blow cracks the armor a little more. And each crack lets in a little more of the world's actual complexity. And the complexity hurts, because complexity is uncomfortable. Because complexity means you cannot be sure anymore, and not being sure feels like weakness. But it is not weakness, it is growth. The philosophical tradition that Finn's arc most closely mirrors is the tradition of moral development theory, specifically the work of Lawrence Kohlberg, who argued that human moral reasoning develops through a series of stages. The earliest stages are characterized by obedience and self-interest. You do the right thing because you will be punished if you do not, or because you will be rewarded if you do. The middle stages are characterized by social conformity. You do the right thing because society expects it, because your peers approve of it, because the rules say to. The highest stages are characterized by principled reasoning. You do the right thing because you have developed internal principles that guide your behavior independently of external reward, punishment, or social pressure. Finn moves through all of these stages. In the earliest episodes, he is good because being good is what heroes do, and heroes are rewarded with admiration and gratitude. In the middle seasons, he is good because the people he loves, Jake, Bubblegum, Marceline, expect him to be good, and disappointing them would be unbearable. In the final seasons, he is good because he has developed an internal commitment to goodness that does not depend on anyone else's expectations. He has reached the stage where being good is not something he does for a reason. It is something he does because it is who he is. The external motivations have fallen away. What remains is the principle. And the principle, stripped of everything else, is remarkably simple. Finn's principle is help. That is it. Not fight evil, not punish the wicked, not save the world. Just help. Whoever needs it, however you can. Whether or not anyone notices. Whether or not it makes a difference. Whether or not the universe cares. Just help. This is not a sophisticated philosophical position. You will not find it in the pages of Kant or Hegel or Camus, but it is the philosophical position that Finn arrives at after 10 seasons of loss, failure, growth, and reflection. And the fact that it is simple does not make it simplistic. It takes Finn 10 seasons to arrive at it precisely because the journey from complexity back to simplicity is the hardest philosophical journey there is. Anyone can be complicated. Complication is easy. You just keep adding layers. Simplicity on the other side of complexity, simplicity that has passed through the fire of doubt and emerged clean, is the rarest thing in philosophy. And Finn achieves it. Now consider the philosophy of Finn's hat. This sounds trivial. It is not. Finn's hat is one of the most symbolically dense objects in the show, and the show's treatment of the hat tracks Finn's philosophical development with remarkable precision. Finn wears a white bear hat for the entire series. He almost never takes it off. When he does take it off, the moment is significant. The hat conceals his hair, which is long and golden. The hat makes Finn look anonymous, interchangeable, generic. Without the hat, Finn looks specific, individual, unique. The hat is a mask, and the show's treatment of the hat is a sustained meditation on the relationship between identity and performance. In the early seasons, the hat is Finn's heroic persona. He wears it the way a knight wears armor, as a statement of role. The hat says, "I am the hero. I am the boy in the hat with the sword. My identity is my function." And this reading works for the early seasons because Finn's identity and his function are the same thing. He is a hero. That is who he is. There is nothing underneath the hat because the hat is the point, but as the series progresses, the hat becomes something else. It becomes a barrier. It becomes the thing Finn hides behind when the world gets too complicated for the heroic persona to handle. When Finn takes the hat off, he is vulnerable. When Finn puts the hat back on, he is protected, and the show tracks this dynamic carefully. Finn removes the hat in moments of genuine emotional exposure. He keeps it on in moments of performance. The hat is not identity. The hat is the performance of identity. And the gap between who Finn is and who Finn performs being is the gap the entire show is about. The philosophy of performance is central to Finn's arc. Existentialists like Sartre argued that human beings are condemned to perform their identities. You do not have a fixed nature. You have habits. You have patterns. You have roles you play so consistently that they feel like who you are. But the feeling is an illusion. Underneath the performance, there is nothing fixed. There is only the freedom to choose the next performance. And the anxiety of that freedom, the vertigo of realizing that you are not your role, that you could stop being who you are at any moment and become something else entirely, is what Sartre called existential anguish. Finn experiences existential anguish most acutely in Season 6, the season of the arm loss and the depression and the father and the comet. In Season 6, the heroic persona collapses. Finn cannot be the hero because the hero's tools, the sword, the certainty, the strength have been taken from him. And without the heroic persona, Finn does not know who he is. He puts the hat on and feels like a fraud. He takes the hat off and feels like a stranger. He is caught between the performance and the void, between the role he has always played and the absence of anything underneath the role. The resolution comes not from finding a new role, but from accepting the absence. Finn learns, over the course of Season 6 and the seasons that follow, that the absence underneath the performance is not a void. It is a space where choices are made, a space where the next version of yourself is decided upon, not by fate or destiny or cosmic script, but by you, in the moment, based on what the moment requires. The hat is still there. The performance is still there, but the relationship between Finn and his performance changes. He is no longer trapped inside the role. He is choosing to play it, and the choosing makes all the difference. There is a philosophical tradition that holds great relevance to Finn's journey, and it is the tradition of virtue ethics, rooted in Aristotle. Virtue ethics does not ask, what is the right thing to do in this situation? That is the question asked by deontological ethics, the ethics of rules and duties. Virtue ethics also does not ask, what action will produce the best outcome? That is the question asked by consequentialism, the ethics of results. Virtue ethics asks a different question entirely. What kind of person should I be? This is Finn's question. From the very beginning, Finn is less interested in making the right choice than in being the right person. He does not follow rules. Not really. He breaks rules when the rules conflict with his instincts. He does not calculate outcomes. He acts on impulse and deals with the consequences afterward. What Finn does, consistently across the entire series, is try to be good. Not to do good, though he does that too. To be good. To cultivate the qualities that make a person worthy of the word good. Courage, compassion, honesty, loyalty, generosity, humility. These are the Aristotelian virtues, and Finn pursues them not as abstractions, but as practices, as habits, as things he does every day until they become part of who he is. Aristotle argued that virtue is a habit. You do not become brave by thinking about bravery. You become brave by doing brave things repeatedly, until bravery becomes your default response. You do not become compassionate by reading about compassion. You become compassionate by practicing compassion day after day, until compassion becomes the lens through which you see the world. Virtue is not a state. It is a practice. It is a discipline. And Finn is, across 10 seasons, a student of that discipline. The beautiful thing about Finn's virtue ethics is that they are imperfect. Finn is not a paragon. He fails, he lies, he manipulates, he gives in to anger and jealousy and selfishness. But the failures do not disqualify him as a virtuous person. In Aristotle's framework, the failures are part of the process. You cannot become virtuous without failing, because virtue requires knowing what failure feels like so that you can recognize it in yourself and correct it. Finn's failures are not evidence that he is not good. They are evidence that he is becoming good, and the becoming, the process, the never-ending practice of trying to be better than you were yesterday, is the whole point. This is where Finn diverges from every other hero in animation. Most animated heroes are good from the beginning. Their goodness is a given, a starting condition, a premise that the show does not question. Finn's goodness is earned. Every episode, every mistake, every loss, every moment of doubt and confusion and pain contributes to the construction of Finn's moral character. He is not born good. He builds himself good, brick by brick, episode by episode, season by season. And the building is messy and imperfect, and sometimes the bricks are the wrong shape, and sometimes the wall falls down, and sometimes Finn has to start over from scratch. But the building continues. It always continues. And the building is the philosophy. There is one more philosophical dimension to Finn that needs to be addressed, and it is perhaps the most important one: the philosophy of play. Finn plays. He plays constantly. He plays with Jake, he plays with BMO, he makes up games, invents challenges, creates scenarios. He turns everything into an adventure, and the adventures are, at their core, games. They have rules, stakes, objectives, and rewards. Finn's entire approach to life is ludic. He treats existence as something to be played with rather than something to be endured. This is not childishness. This is philosophy. The philosopher Johann Huizinga argued in his work Homo Ludens that play is the foundation of human culture. Everything that makes civilization worthwhile, art, law, philosophy, war, religion, began as play. Play is not the opposite of seriousness. Play is the precondition for seriousness. You cannot build a civilization without first being willing to play, to experiment, to try things that might not work, to risk looking foolish, to engage with the world as a source of wonder rather than a source of threat. Finn's philosophy of play is his deepest wisdom, deeper than his existentialism, deeper than his virtue ethics, deeper than his engagement with death and identity and violence. Because play is what makes all of those things bearable. You can face death if you treat the facing as a game. You can endure suffering if you treat the endurance as a challenge. You can lose everything if you treat the loss as the setup for the next adventure. Play does not minimize the seriousness of life. Play makes the seriousness survivable. And this is why Adventure Time works as a sleep essay, because the show's fundamental philosophy is that life is a game worth playing, and the playing does not require winning, and the not winning does not require sadness. And the sadness, when it comes, is just the space between one game and the next. You are listening to this because you cannot sleep, or because you want help sleeping, or because you like the sound of someone talking about things that matter in a voice that does not demand anything of you. And the philosophy of Finn the Human says, that is fine. Being here is enough. Listening is enough. Resting is enough. You do not need to do anything. You do not need to achieve anything. You do not need to be anything. You just need to be here, in this moment, in this quiet space. And the being here is the game, and the game is worth playing, and you are playing it right now. The genius of Finn's philosophy is that it does not require belief. You do not need to believe in God, in karma, in the universe's plan, in destiny, in fate, in any metaphysical framework at all. in order to find Finn's philosophy meaningful. All you need to believe is that you exist, and that other people exist, and that the existence of other people places a claim on your attention and your compassion. That is the entire starting point. Everything else, the virtue ethics, the existentialism, the philosophy of play, the acceptance of death, all of it grows from that single seed. You exist, others exist, and the existence of others matters. Finn never articulates this. He never sits down and lays out his philosophical framework in a seminar. He never reads Aristotle or Camus or Heidegger. He has never heard of virtue ethics or existentialism or negative capability. He has no vocabulary for what he believes, but he lives it. Every day, every episode, every adventure. He lives the philosophy that it takes professional philosophers thousands of pages to describe. And he lives it better than most of them describe it, because living a philosophy is harder than describing one. And Finn does the hard thing, always, without complaint, without even realizing it is hard. That is the final lesson, the final philosophical takeaway from 10 seasons and 4 specials and hundreds of episodes of a cartoon about a boy and his dog. The lesson is, you do not need to understand your philosophy in order to have one. You do not need to name your values in order to live by them. You do not need to know what you believe in order to believe it. Every choice you make is a philosophical statement. Every act of kindness is an argument. Every time you get up after falling down, you are making a claim about the nature of existence, that it is worth continuing, that the game is worth playing, that the meat reality is worth seeing through. Finn makes that claim every day. And tonight, lying wherever you are, listening to this, drifting towards sleep or already there, you are making the same claim. You chose to be here. You chose to listen. You chose to spend time thinking about the philosophy of a cartoon character. And the choosing is itself a philosophical act. It says, I care about meaning. I care about what things signify. I care enough to lie in the dark and listen to someone talk about a boy in a hat who fights monsters and loses his arm and turns down godhood because he wants to keep being human. That caring is the philosophy, not what Finn believes, not what you believe. The caring itself, the willingness to take a story seriously, the willingness to find meaning in a cartoon, the willingness to lie awake or fall asleep thinking about what it means to be good in a world that does not require goodness from you. But there is more to say about Finn before we reach the end, and the more involves a dimension of his philosophy that we have not yet explored, his relationship with forgiveness. Forgiveness is the hardest philosophical problem in Finn's life because forgiveness requires something that heroism does not, the willingness to let go. Heroes hold on. Heroes grip the sword. Heroes do not release the thing that drives them. And what drives Finn, especially in the middle seasons, is anger. Anger at the Ice King for being broken. Anger at Martin for being absent. Anger at Flame Princess for leaving. Anger at himself for being the kind of person who makes the people he loves leave. Forgiveness asks Finn to release the anger. And releasing the anger feels like releasing the fuel. Without the anger, what drives him? Without the grievance, what motivates the quest? This is a question that the philosophical tradition of resentment, explored by thinkers from Nietzsche to Jean Emery, takes very seriously. Resentment is not just an emotion. It is a form of energy. It is the thing that keeps you moving when everything else has been taken away. And letting go of resentment can feel like letting go of the last source of power you have. Finn's forgiveness of Martin is the most philosophically significant act of forgiveness in the series. It does not happen in a single moment. It happens across seasons. In season 6, Finn is consumed by anger toward his father. He builds a tower into space trying to reach Martin and take revenge. In the tower, Finn's anger manifests as a psychic arm, a phantom limb made of rage, and he uses it to climb toward the sky. The episode ends with Finn realizing that the phantom arm is not strength. It is a symptom. The anger is not powering him up, it is eating him alive. The forgiveness comes gradually, and it comes not through a single dramatic moment, but through the slow accumulation of understanding. Finn learns, episode by episode, that Martin is not worth the anger. Not because Martin is forgivable, because Martin is irrelevant. The anger Finn feels toward Martin gives Martin power over Finn's emotional life, and Martin does not deserve that power. Forgiving Martin is not an act of compassion toward Martin. It is an act of liberation from Martin. Finn forgives not because Martin has earned forgiveness, but because Finn has decided that Martin will no longer determine how Finn feels. This is a specific philosophical form of forgiveness that the philosopher Hannah Arendt described as the only remedy for the irreversibility of action. Arendt argued that once something is done, it cannot be undone. Martin abandoned Finn. That happened. It is a fact. No amount of anger will change it. No revenge will undo it. The only thing that can free Finn from the past is forgiveness. Not because forgiveness changes the past, but because forgiveness breaks the chain that connects the past to the present. Without forgiveness, Finn is perpetually tethered to the moment of abandonment. With forgiveness, Finn is free to walk away from that moment and into whatever comes next. Finn's forgiveness of himself is equally important and less discussed. Finn makes mistakes throughout the series. He manipulates Flame Princess, he neglects his responsibilities, he acts selfishly, he hurts people he loves, and each mistake produces guilt, and the guilt accumulates, and the accumulation of guilt is its own form of imprisonment. Finn carries his mistakes the way he carries his sword, always, everywhere, as part of his identity. Self-forgiveness requires Finn to do something that his heroic persona finds almost impossible, to accept that he is capable of being wrong. Heroes are supposed to be right. Heroes are supposed to be better than ordinary people. And Finn's self-image as a hero makes it very difficult for him to integrate his failures into his understanding of himself. Each failure feels like proof that he is not the hero he thinks he is. Each mistake feels like evidence against his own worthiness. The philosophical resolution comes through Finn's growing understanding that worthiness is not the same as perfection. You do not have to be perfect to be worthy. You do not have to be flawless to be good. You have to be honest about your flaws and committed to doing better. That is all. And Finn, by the end of the series, has achieved this honesty. He knows he is imperfect. He knows he is capable of selfishness and cruelty and moral failure. And he has decided that these things are not reasons to stop trying. They are reasons to try harder. The imperfection is not a disqualification from goodness. It is the prerequisite for goodness. Because goodness in the absence of temptation is not virtue. It is merely absence of vice. And virtue, real virtue, requires the presence of temptation and the choice to resist it. Finn's failures are what make his eventual goodness meaningful. Without the failures, the goodness would be automatic. With them, the goodness is a choice. And the choosing is the point. The philosophy of Finn also encompasses a profound engagement with the concept of home. And this is something the show explores with more subtlety than it gets credit for. The treehouse is not just where Finn lives. It is his philosophical anchor. It is the fixed point around which his entire life revolves. He goes out into the world, has adventures, encounters danger, faces moral crises, and then he comes home. The coming home is as important as the going out, because the going out is where Finn tests his philosophy. But the coming home is where Finn processes what the testing revealed. The treehouse is a space of integration. It is where Finn sits on the couch with Jake and talks about what happened. It is where Finn lies in bed and stares at the ceiling and tries to make sense of things that do not make sense. It is where the raw experience of adventure is converted into the refined understanding of wisdom. Without the treehouse, Finn's adventures would be unprocessed. They would be data without interpretation, experience without reflection, events without meaning. The philosopher Gaston Bachelard wrote about the poetics of space, the idea that the spaces we inhabit are not neutral containers, but active participants in our psychological and philosophical development. The house, Bachelard argued, is the first universe. It is the space where the child learns to dream, to imagine, to create an inner world. And the treehouse in Adventure Time is exactly this. It is Finn's first universe. It is the space where he learned to be a hero, where he learned to dream about adventure, where he learned to imagine himself as something more than a boy in a hat. And the treehouse changes as Finn changes. In the early seasons, the treehouse is full of treasure, weapons, trophies from adventure. It is a monument to the heroic persona. In the later seasons, the treehouse is more lived in, more domestic, more like a home than a museum. The trophies are replaced by personal items. The weapons are stored rather than displayed. The space reflects Finn's movement from performance to authenticity, from heroism as display to heroism as habit. When the treehouse is destroyed in the finale, it is a philosophical statement. The home that anchored Finn's development is gone. The space that housed his becoming is no longer available. And Finn, standing in the wreckage, does not collapse. He does not lose himself, because the treehouse did its job. It gave Finn the space to become who he is. And now that Finn is who he is, the space is no longer necessary. The philosophy is inside him now. The integration has been completed. The home is no longer a building. It is a state of being. This is one of the show's most elegant philosophical moves. The treehouse as nursery, as cocoon, as the structure that protects the growing thing until the growing thing no longer needs protection. Finn does not need the treehouse because Finn has become the treehouse. He has internalized the safety, the warmth, the space for reflection. He carries his home inside himself the way he carries his philosophy inside himself. Not as a set of rules or beliefs, but as a way of being in the world. Comfortable, open, ready for whatever comes next. The concept of heroism itself undergoes a philosophical transformation across the series that mirrors Finn's personal transformation. In the beginning, heroism is physical. It is fighting, it is saving. It is the muscular, visible, dramatic intervention of a strong person into a dangerous situation. By the end, heroism is something else entirely. In the later seasons, Finn's most heroic acts are not physical, they are emotional. His decision to forgive Martin is more heroic than any sword fight. His willingness to sit with the Ice King without trying to fix him is more heroic than any rescue mission. His choice to let Flame Princess go rather than try to keep her is more heroic than any battle. These acts do not look like heroism. They do not have the visual glamour of heroism. The raised sword, the dramatic pose, the triumphant music. They look like nothing. They look like a boy sitting quietly in a room, feeling something difficult, and choosing to feel it rather than running away. But that is what heroism actually is, the show argues. Heroism is not the dramatic moment. Heroism is not punching the monster. Heroism is sitting with the feeling that makes you want to punch something and choosing not to. Heroism is not saving the day. Heroism is saving yourself from the version of yourself that would make things worse. And this redefinition of heroism, from external to internal, from physical to emotional, from dramatic to quiet, is the philosophical backbone of the entire series. The show's engagement with the philosophy of nature and the natural world deserves mention as well. Finn is the last human in a world that has moved on from humanity. The world of Ooo is post-human. Nature has reclaimed what humanity destroyed. Magic has replaced technology. And the question the show implicitly asks is the world better off without humans? The answer the show gives is complicated. Ooo is beautiful. It is vibrant and strange and full of life. It is, in many ways, a paradise. But it is also dangerous, violent, and frequently cruel. The post-human world is not a utopia. It is a world with all the mess and beauty and suffering that any world contains. The absence of humanity has not eliminated conflict. It has merely changed its form. Instead of human wars, there are candy wars. Instead of human tyrannies, there are candy dictatorships. The patterns repeat because the patterns are not human patterns. They are life patterns. And life, regardless of its form, generates the same philosophical problems. How to live well, how to treat others, how to face death, how to find meaning. Finn's role in this post-human world is paradoxical. He is the last representative of the species that nearly destroyed the planet. He is also the greatest hero the new world has ever produced. The show's philosophical position on this paradox is generous. Humanity's destructive capacity and humanity's heroic capacity are not separate things. They are the same energy, directed differently. The same impulse that built the mushroom bomb also built the Finn sword. The same species that nearly ended the world also produced the boy who saved it. And the lesson is, the capacity for destruction and the capacity for creation are the same capacity. What matters is the direction. What matters is the choice. Finn chooses creation, always. Even when destruction would be easier. Even when the destruction would be satisfying. Even when the enemy deserves to be destroyed. Finn chooses, whenever possible, the creative option. He builds rather than breaks. He helps rather than hurts. He creates rather than destroys. And this consistent choosing, this stubborn, irrational, beautiful insistence on creation over destruction, is the show's final answer to the question of whether the world is better off without humans. The answer is, the world is not better off without humans. The world is better off with this kind of human. The kind who chooses to create. The kind who chooses to help. The kind who looks at a broken world and says, I can do something about this. Not everything, but something, and something is enough. Finn's philosophy can be distilled, if you insist on distilling it, into a single principle that he lives but never states. The world owes you nothing, and you owe the world everything. This is not a principle you will find in any philosophical textbook. It is not associated with any school of thought. It is entirely Finn's own, arrived at through 10 seasons of experience, and it is, in its quiet way, radical. Most philosophical frameworks begin from the assumption that the individual has rights. Rights to freedom, rights to happiness, rights to be treated fairly. And these rights create obligations in others. The obligation to respect your freedom, to support your happiness, to treat you justly. Finn's philosophy inverts this. Finn does not start from rights, he starts from obligations. He does not ask, what does the world owe me? He asks, what do I owe the world? And his answer, the answer he has been living for his entire life, is everything. He owes the world his courage. He owes the world his compassion. He owes the world his willingness to show up, to try, to fail, to try again. He owes the world the best version of himself. And when the best version is not available, he owes the world the effort of trying to find it. This is not self-sacrifice. Finn is not a martyr. He does not suffer for the world's sake. He helps for the world's sake, and the helping brings him joy. And the joy is genuine. And the genuineness is what makes the philosophy work. Finn does not resent his obligations. He embraces them. He finds meaning in them. He finds purpose in them. The obligations are not a burden. They are the structure of his life. They are the scaffolding on which he builds his identity, his relationships, his philosophy. Without the obligations, Finn would be lost. With them, he is exactly where he needs to be. There is a question that philosophy has been asking for as long as philosophy has existed. And it is the question that Finn's entire life answers, without ever asking it directly. What is the good life? Aristotle called the good life eudaimonia, a word that is usually translated as happiness, but that actually means something closer to flourishing. Eudaimonia is not the feeling of happiness. It is the state of living well. It is the condition of a life that is being lived to its fullest potential. A life in which a person's capacities are being used. A life in which the person is becoming what they are capable of becoming. And the crucial thing about eudaimonia is that it is not a destination. It is an activity. You do not achieve eudaimonia and then sit in it. You practice eudaimonia, you do it. Every day, every choice, every moment. Finn practices eudaimonia without knowing the word. His life is a life of flourishing, not because it is pleasant. It is frequently unpleasant, not because it is successful. He fails constantly, not because it is comfortable. It is anything but because Finn is using his capacities to their fullest extent. He is using his courage, he is using his compassion, he is using his intelligence, which is underrated. He is using his creativity, his resilience, his love, his stubbornness. Every part of Finn that is capable of being used is being used. Nothing is dormant, nothing is wasted. And the result, even when the result includes pain and loss and failure, is a life that is fully lived. The opposite of eudaimonia in Aristotle's framework is not suffering, it is stagnation. A person who is not using their capacities, not growing, not engaging with the world, is not suffering in any obvious way. They might even be comfortable, but they are not flourishing. They are merely existing. And the difference between existing and flourishing is the difference between a fire that is banked and a fire that is burning. Both are fires, but only one is doing what a fire is supposed to do. Finn is always burning. Even in his depressive episodes, even in his lowest moments, there is a fire in Finn that never goes out. He may be confused about what to do with the fire. He may be angry about the fire's consequences. He may wish in dark moments that the fire would let him rest. But the fire is what makes him Finn, and the show's philosophy expressed through Finn's life is that the fire is worth the burns. The flourishing is worth the pain. The fully lived life is worth the cost of fully living it. This connects to the Stoic philosophy that runs through the show like a quiet current. Stoicism is the philosophy that holds that the only things truly in your control are your own responses to events. You cannot control what happens to you. You can only control how you respond. And the Stoic response to suffering is not to avoid it or deny it, but to face it with equanimity, to accept it as part of the natural order, and to focus your energy on the one thing you can actually influence, your own character. Finn is a natural Stoic, though he would never use the word. When bad things happen to him, and bad things happen to him constantly, his response is not to collapse or to rage. His response is to deal with it. Not gracefully, not perfectly, but deal with it. Face it, accept that it has happened, and then move forward. The Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations that the obstacle is the way, that the thing standing in your path is not preventing you from moving forward, but is itself the path. Finn embodies this principle. Every obstacle Finn encounters becomes the material for his next act of growth. The Ice King's madness becomes the material for learning compassion. Martin's abandonment becomes the material for learning self-reliance. The loss of his arm becomes the material for learning humility. The obstacle is not in Finn's way. The obstacle is Finn's way. It is the terrain on which his philosophy is built. But Finn is not purely Stoic. Stoicism, in its classical form, advocates for emotional detachment. The Stoic ideal is a mind that is undisturbed by external events, a mind that maintains its composure regardless of what is happening in the world around it. Finn does not achieve this. Finn does not want to achieve this. Finn feels things deeply, messily, loudly. He cries when he is sad. He yells when he is angry. He laughs when he is happy. He does not distance himself from his emotions. He dives into them. And the diving, the willingness to be fully present in his emotional experience, is what makes Finn's philosophy warmer than classical Stoicism. Finn is a Stoic who has not killed his heart. He is a stoic who feels everything and keeps going anyway. And that combination, the stoic discipline and the emotional openness, is what makes his philosophy uniquely his own. The philosophy of adventure itself, the concept that gives the show its name, is worth examining through Finn's eyes. What is adventure? The word comes from the Latin adventura, meaning something that is about to happen. An adventure is, etymologically, an encounter with the unknown. It is the experience of stepping into a situation whose outcome you cannot predict. Finn lives for adventure. He craves it. He seeks it out. He structures his entire life around it. And the show's treatment of Finn's craving for adventure evolves across the seasons in a way that tracks his philosophical development. In the early seasons, adventure is excitement. It is fun. It is the thrill of the unknown, the adrenaline of danger, the satisfaction of overcoming challenges. Finn adventures because adventuring is enjoyable. In the middle seasons, adventure becomes something more complicated. The adventures are not always fun anymore. They are sometimes painful, sometimes boring, sometimes morally ambiguous. Finn's eagerness for adventure is sometimes revealed to be a form of avoidance. Adventuring is a way of not having to sit with difficult feelings. If you are always running toward the next quest, you never have to stop and think about the things that hurt. The sword is a distraction as much as it is a tool. In the later seasons, adventure becomes something even more complex. It becomes a practice. Not a practice of excitement or avoidance, but a practice of engagement. Finn adventures because adventuring is how he engages with the world. It is his form of attention. It is the way he says to the universe, I am here. I am paying attention. I am willing to be surprised. And the willingness to be surprised, the openness to the unknown, the refusal to let the world become routine, is itself a philosophical position. It is the position that reality is always more complex than your understanding of it, and that the appropriate response to that complexity is not to simplify it, but to go deeper into it, to adventure into it, to treat every new situation as a frontier and every frontier as an invitation. This is the philosophical concept of wonder, which the philosopher Abraham Heschel called the beginning of wisdom. Wonder is the state of mind that encounters the world as if for the first time, that sees the familiar as strange and the strange as beautiful, that refuses to take anything for granted. Finn maintains wonder throughout the series. He never becomes jaded, he never becomes bored, he never looks at the world and says, I have seen this before. Every sunrise in Ooo is Finn's first sunrise. Every monster is Finn's first friend. And this perpetual freshness, this refusal of routine is not naivety. It is discipline. It is the discipline of paying attention. And paying attention, according to the philosopher Simone Weil, is the rarest and purest form of generosity. Finn pays attention to the world. That is his philosophy. That is his gift. That is his heroism. Not the sword, not the courage, not the moral framework. The attention. The willingness to look at the world and really see it, to look at other people and really see them, to look at himself and really see himself, even when what he sees is uncomfortable, even when what he sees is painful, even when what he sees contradicts everything he thought he knew. Attention is the root of all the other virtues Finn displays. Courage is attention to danger. Compassion is attention to truth. Loyalty is attention to commitment. All of these virtues are forms of paying attention to something and refusing to look away. And Finn, across 10 seasons, refuses to look away. He looks at the Ice King and does not look away from the madness. He looks at Martin and does not look away from the abandonment. He looks at himself and does not look away from his own failures. He pays attention to everything. And the attention, accumulated across a lifetime of adventures, becomes wisdom. The show's treatment of Finn's relationship with mortality has one additional layer that is worth exploring. Finn is the last human. He knows he is the last human. He knows that when he dies, his species dies with him. This knowledge is, philosophically speaking, an extinction-level existential burden. Every other being in Ooo has a community. Bubblegum has the Candy People. Marceline has the vampire lineage. Jake has his family. Finn has no one. He is the sole representative of an entire species. He carries all of human history on his shoulders, and he carries it alone. The show acknowledges this burden rarely and delicately. Finn does not talk about being the last human very often. When he does, it is in moments of vulnerability, in moments when the mask slips and the loneliness underneath is briefly visible. In the episode Susan Strong, Finn meets a group of people he believes might be humans, and his excitement is painful to watch. The eagerness, the hope, the desperate desire to not be alone in his species. And then the revelation that they are not fully human, that they are hybrids or mutants, and the quiet deflation that follows. The philosophy of being the last of something is the philosophy of radical responsibility. If you are the last representative of a species, then everything you do is a statement about what your species was. If Finn is kind, then humans were kind. If Finn is brave, then humans were brave. If Finn is good, then humans were good. And if Finn fails, if Finn is selfish or cowardly or cruel, then that too becomes a statement about humanity. Finn carries the weight of being humanity's final ambassador to a world that has mostly forgotten that humanity ever existed. And the way he carries that weight, with grace and humility and a kind of unconscious dignity, is his most quietly heroic act. Every time Finn helps a candy person or saves a flame person or befriends a dog person, he is rewriting the story of humanity. The last thing the world remembers about humans was the Mushroom War. The last human memory was a bomb. Finn is replacing that memory with a different one. He is showing the world that humans are not just the species that destroyed everything, they are also the species that helped, that cared, that showed up, that tried. And the rewriting, the replacement of one final memory with another, is a philosophical act of the highest order. It is the act of redeeming an entire species through the behavior of a single member. And the fact that Finn does not know he is doing it, the fact that he is not consciously trying to redeem humanity, but is simply being himself, makes the redemption more genuine. He is not performing goodness for the sake of his species' reputation. He is simply good. And the goodness radiates outward. And the radiation touches everyone in Ooo. And everyone in Ooo who has been touched by Finn's goodness has a slightly different understanding of what humanity was. Not a species that destroyed the world, a species that produced Finn. And that is a good thing to be remembered for. The question the show ultimately asks through Finn is not what is the meaning of life. The show is too wise for that question. The question the show asks is, given that life has no inherent meaning, how should you live? And Finn's answer, lived rather than spoken, experienced rather than theorized, is with attention, with compassion, with courage, with humility, with the willingness to fail and the stubbornness to try again, with love for the people around you and respect for the mystery you cannot understand. With the hat on when you need it, and the hat off when you do not. With the sword in your hand and the knowledge that the sword is not always the answer. With the fire burning and the acceptance that the fire will sometimes burn you. With the understanding that you are small, that the universe is large, that the gap between the two is infinite, and that the infinite gap is not a reason to stop. It is a reason to go. That is Finn's philosophy. It is not written in any book. It is lived in every episode, and it is, in its own quiet, imperfect, beautiful way, the best philosophy any cartoon character has ever practiced. There is a dimension of Finn's philosophy that we have been circling around without naming directly, and it is time to name it. The dimension is love. Not romantic love, though Finn's romantic life is philosophically rich. Love in the broadest sense. Love as a philosophical commitment. Love as a way of being in the world. Finn loves. That is the simplest and most important thing about him. He loves Jake. He loves Marceline. He loves Bubblegum. He loves BMO and Lady Rainicorn and the Candy Kingdom citizens, and the land of Ooo itself. He loves people he barely knows. He loves people who have hurt him. He loves people who do not love him back. He loves with a generosity that is almost absurd in its scope. And the absurdity is the point, because love, real love, the kind that Finn practices, is absurd. It does not make strategic sense. It does not maximize utility. It does not protect the lover from harm. If anything, it guarantees harm, because to love is to make yourself vulnerable. And to make yourself vulnerable is to guarantee that the world will eventually hurt you in the place where your guard is down. Finn knows this, not intellectually, experientially. He has been hurt by every person he has loved. Jake has disappointed him. Bubblegum has used him. Flame Princess has left him. Martin has abandoned him. The Ice King has broken his heart by being a shell of the man he used to be. Every relationship Finn has entered has eventually produced pain. And Finn keeps loving. He does not withdraw. He does not build walls. He does not decide that love is not worth the risk. He takes the hit and goes back for more. The philosopher Emmanuel Levinas argued that ethics begins with the face of the other. When you look at another person's face, truly look, you encounter something that demands a response. The face of the other is a call. It says, I am here. I am vulnerable. I need something from you. And the ethical response, according to Levinas, is to answer that call. Not because answering serves your interests, not because answering is rational, but because the call exists and you heard it, and hearing it obligates you to respond. Finn hears the call every time, without exception. When someone is in need, Finn responds. When someone is in pain, Finn shows up. When someone's face asks for help, Finn helps. And he does not evaluate the call before responding. He does not ask whether the person deserves help. He does not calculate the cost of helping. He simply hears and responds. This is love as ethical practice. This is love as the foundation of morality. Not love as sentiment, not love as romance. Love is the fundamental orientation toward other beings that makes all other virtues possible. Without love, courage is just recklessness. Without love, compassion is just pity. Without love, justice is just punishment. Love is the thing that connects the virtues to each other, the thing that gives them direction and purpose, the thing that transforms abstract moral principles into concrete acts of care. And Finn's philosophy at its deepest level is a philosophy of love, not because Finn is a romantic or a sentimentalist, because Finn has discovered through years of experience that love is the only philosophical position that can survive contact with reality. Every other position breaks eventually. Certainty breaks when the world turns out to be more complex than your certainty can handle. Cynicism breaks when someone does something genuinely kind and you cannot explain it away. Nihilism breaks when you find something you care about despite believing that nothing matters. Stoicism breaks when someone you love dies and the grief overwhelms your carefully constructed composure. Every philosophical position that tries to protect you from the world eventually fails because the world is stronger than any protection. Love does not protect you from the world. Love exposes you to the world, and the exposure is the point. Because the world, experienced without protection, is devastating and beautiful and overwhelming and sacred all at the same time. And the person who experiences the world through love, without armor, without distance, without the safety net of a philosophical position that keeps the world at arm's length, is the person who experiences reality as it actually is. Finn experiences reality as it actually is. That is his great gift and his great burden. He does not filter. He does not protect himself. He walks into every situation with his heart open and his guard down and his willingness to be hurt fully intact. And the world hurts him over and over. And he lets it over and over because the alternative, the closed heart, the guarded soul, the protected but unliving existence is worse than any pain. This is not masochism. This is not the philosophy of someone who enjoys suffering. This is the philosophy of someone who has realized that the price of fully living is fully hurting, and who has decided after careful and repeated consideration that the living is worth the hurting, that the sunrises are worth the sunsets, that the hellos are worth the goodbyes, that the love is worth the loss. Finn makes this decision every morning, every episode, every season. He wakes up in the treehouse and puts on his hat and picks up his sword and walks out the door into a world that will hurt him. And he does it with a smile, not because he is naive, not because he does not understand what is coming, but because he has decided that the morning is worth the night, that the adventure is worth the danger, that the friend is worth the grief, that the life, with all its imperfection and pain and confusion and loss, is worth living. Let us talk about what Finn's philosophy means for you. Because you are here, and you are listening, and the listening is not an accident. You chose this. You chose to spend time with Finn's philosophy, which means something about Finn's philosophy resonates with something in your own life, and the resonance is worth paying attention to. Finn's philosophy says, you do not have to be perfect to be good. You do not have to understand the world to love it. You do not have to have a plan to move forward. You do not have to know who you are to be who you are. You just have to show up. You just have to pay attention. You just have to care about the people around you and try every day to be slightly better than you were the day before. And if you fail, and you will fail, the failure is not the end. The failure is the material. The failure is what you build the next version of yourself from. And the next version will also fail. And the version after that. And the one after that. And the failing and the building and the failing and the building is not a cycle of futility. It is a cycle of growth. And the growth does not have a destination. The growth is the destination. You are not Finn. You do not live in a treehouse in a post-apocalyptic Candyland. You do not fight monsters or rescue princesses or carry a sword made from a version of yourself. But you do wake up every morning, and you do face situations that have no clear right answer, and you do make choices that affect other people, and you do carry the weight of who you have been and the hope of who you might become. And in all of these things, you and Finn are the same. You are human. You are imperfect. You are trying. And the trying, Finn's philosophy says, is the whole thing, not the result. The trying. The show never gives Finn a moment of total philosophical clarity. He never stands on a mountaintop and announces his worldview. He never writes a treatise or delivers a manifesto. His philosophy is entirely embodied. It lives in his actions, not his words. It lives in the way he treats the people he loves. It lives in the way he responds to failure. It lives in the way he faces the unknown, not with confidence, but with willingness, not with certainty, but with courage, not with a plan, but with a heart. And this embodied philosophy, this lived philosophy, is more powerful than any articulated one. Because articulated philosophies can be argued with. You can challenge a thesis. You can dismantle an argument. You can find the flaws in a logical structure. But you cannot argue with a life. You cannot challenge the way someone lives. You can only witness it. And in witnessing Finn's life, across 10 seasons and 4 specials, and hundreds of episodes, you have witnessed something that no philosophical treatise can fully capture. The sight of a person living well. Not perfectly, not easily, not without pain, but well, with attention and compassion and courage and love, with all the virtues that philosophy has spent 3,000 years trying to define, practiced naturally, effortlessly by a cartoon boy in a white hat. That is the philosophy of Finn the human, not an argument, a life, not a position, a practice, not something you believe. Something you do. Before we come to the end, there is one more thing worth saying about Finn, and it is about his relationship with the audience. Because Finn is not just a character, he is a mirror, and the philosophy of mirrors is the philosophy of recognition. What you see in the mirror is not the mirror, it is you. Finn grows up over the course of the show. He starts at 12 and ends at 17. And the audience that started watching Adventure Time when it premiered on April 5th, 2010, grew up alongside him. The children who were 12 when Finn was 12 were 17 when Finn was 17. They went through adolescence together. They experienced the confusion and the heartbreak and the identity crisis and the moral complexity together. Finn's philosophical journey was for millions of viewers their own philosophical journey, experienced simultaneously, in parallel, with the same timeline and the same emotional beats. This is unprecedented in animation. Most animated characters do not age. Most animated characters do not develop philosophically. Most animated characters exist in a perpetual present, repeating the same patterns, facing the same types of challenges, maintaining the same personality from the first episode to the last. Finn broke this pattern. Finn grew. And because Finn grew, the audience grew. Not because the audience was learning from Finn. Because the audience was growing at the same rate for the same reasons, and Finn gave them a vocabulary for what they were experiencing. When Finn lost his arm, viewers who were going through their own versions of loss, the loss of a parent, the loss of a relationship, the loss of childhood certainty, had a way to talk about it. Finn lost his arm. I lost my faith. Finn lost his arm. I lost my family. The specific loss does not matter. The structure of the loss is the same. And Finn's response to the loss, the depression, the anger, the slow rebuilding, the eventual acceptance, gave viewers a model for how to process their own grief. Not a perfect model, a human one. An imperfect one, a model that includes falling apart before putting yourself back together. And that imperfection, that honesty about the messiness of recovery, is what made Finn useful as a philosophical mirror. He did not show the audience how to be perfect, he showed the audience how to be human. The philosopher Martha Nussbaum has written extensively about the role of literature in moral development. She argues that stories are not just entertainment, they are ethical exercises. When you engage deeply with a fictional character, you practice empathy. You practice perspective taking. You practice the moral imagination that is the foundation of ethical behavior. And when that character is as philosophically rich as Finn, the practice is correspondingly deep. Reading Finn, watching Finn, listening to someone talk about Finn at 2 in the morning while you lie in bed trying to sleep is itself a philosophical act. It is the act of engaging with the question of how to live, using the medium of story in the way that humans have been engaging with that question since the first campfire. You are engaging with it right now. You are lying in the dark, or sitting in a chair, or driving somewhere with this playing in your earbuds, and you are thinking about what it means to be good. You are thinking about what it means to grow. You are thinking about what it means to love people who hurt you and forgive people who abandon you and keep going when the world gives you no reason to keep going. You are thinking these things because Finn thought them first, or rather lived them first, and his living gave you permission to think about your own life in the same terms. That is the philosophy of Finn the human as a cultural artifact. He is not just a character in a show, he is a philosophical companion. He walked alongside a generation of viewers as they went from childhood to adulthood, and he showed them, by example, that the walk is difficult and painful and confusing and absolutely unequivocally worth taking. He did not teach them how to live. He showed them that living is something you figure out as you go, and the figuring out is the adventure, and the adventure is the point. There is one final philosophical thread to pull, and it is the thread of legacy. What does Finn leave behind? Not in the narrative sense of plot consequences, in the philosophical sense of impact on the world. Finn's legacy is not a kingdom. He does not build a civilization. He does not write a book. He does not create a philosophical system. His legacy is simpler than that and more durable. He showed the people around him what it looks like to live with integrity. That is his entire legacy. The sight of him doing it, the memory of a boy who tried hard and failed often, and got up every time and never stopped caring about the people around him. And this is the most stoic and the most beautiful thing about Finn's philosophy. The Stoics believe that the only thing you leave behind that matters is your example. Not your accomplishments, not your wealth, not your power, your example. How you lived, how you treated people, how you faced difficulty. These things outlast everything else because they are not stored in buildings or books or bank accounts. They are stored in the people who witness them. They propagate through memory and imitation and inspiration. They spread the way a fire spreads, from one person to the next, each one catching the flame from the one before. Finn's flame spreads to Shermie and Beth. It spreads to everyone in Ooo who ever saw him be brave or kind or foolish or stubborn. It spreads through the centuries. It spreads through BMO's stories. And it spreads through the screen, through the fourth wall, to you. You are carrying Finn's flame, not because you were asked to, because you chose to. Because something about the way a cartoon boy lived his life resonated with something inside you. And the resonance is still vibrating, and it will keep vibrating for as long as you remember. And you will remember. Because Finn is not easy to forget. And the things he showed you about how to live are not easy to unlive. That is Finn's philosophy in its final form. Not a system, a flame. Passed from character to viewer, from screen to soul. From a cartoon about a boy and his dog to the quiet darkness of your bedroom at whatever hour of the night this is. You are holding it now, not because you understand it, because you feel it. And the feeling is the philosophy. And the philosophy is enough. There is something the show does with Finn that almost no one talks about. And it is the philosophy of seasons, not television seasons. Actual seasons. The passage of time within the show, the changing of light and weather and circumstance, carries philosophical weight that is easy to overlook. In the early episodes, the world of Ooo is perpetually bright. The sun shines, the colors are vivid. The world is presented in the visual language of eternal summer. This is not an accident, it is a reflection of Finn's philosophy at that stage. Simple, bright, uncomplicated. The world is good because it looks good. The world is safe because it feels safe. The visual design of the show mirrors Finn's inner state. As the show progresses, the palette changes. The later seasons are darker, both literally and figuratively. The colors are more muted. The lighting is more complex. Shadows appear where there were none before. And this visual shift tracks Finn's philosophical darkening with remarkable precision. The world becomes less bright as Finn becomes less certain. The colors become more muted as Finn's moral framework becomes more nuanced. The show is doing something that animation rarely attempts, using the visual language of the medium as a philosophical argument. The darkening is not a decline, it is a deepening. A world of only bright colors is a world without dimension. A world that includes shadows is a world that has depth. And depth, in both the visual and the philosophical sense, requires the presence of darkness. Finn's early certainty was bright but shallow. His later uncertainty is darker but deeper. And the depth is where the philosophy lives. The show also uses the physical landscape of Ooo as a philosophical map. The different kingdoms represent different philosophical orientations, and Finn's movement through them represents his engagement with different ways of being in the world. The Candy Kingdom is the philosophy of order. Everything is organized, everything is governed, everything has a place and a purpose. The Candy Kingdom is Plato's republic made of sugar. A society organized by a philosopher-ruler according to rational principles, in which every citizen has a role, and every role serves the whole. Finn is drawn to the Candy Kingdom because order is comforting, especially to a young person who is trying to make sense of a chaotic world. The Candy Kingdom says, the world can be organized. The world can be made to make sense. And Finn, in the early seasons, believes this. The Fire Kingdom is the philosophy of passion. Everything is intense. Everything is burning. Everything is driven by emotion rather than reason. The Fire Kingdom is the romantic response to the Enlightenment. The insistence that feeling is more important than thinking, that authenticity is more important than order, that the flame of genuine emotion is worth more than the structure of rational governance. Finn's relationship with Flame Princess is his encounter with romanticism, and the relationship teaches him that passion without wisdom is destructive, that feeling without thinking leads to burns, that the fire is beautiful but dangerous and must be approached with respect rather than recklessness. The Ice Kingdom is the philosophy of isolation. Everything is cold. Everything is alone. The Ice King sits in his castle surrounded by penguins who cannot talk to him, playing drums for an audience that does not care, writing stories for readers who do not exist. The Ice Kingdom is the philosophical tradition of solipsism, the belief that only your own mind is real, taken to its logical and devastating conclusion. And Finn's engagement with the Ice King is his encounter with solipsism's failure, the discovery that a mind alone is a mind in pain, that isolation is not freedom but imprisonment, that the cold is not peaceful but deadening. The Nightosphere is the philosophy of desire without consequence. Everything is permitted, nothing matters. There are no rules, no structures, no obligations. The Nightosphere is the philosophical tradition of libertinism, the absolute prioritization of individual desire over collective good. And Finn's encounter with the Nightosphere, through Marceline and through Hunson Abadir, teaches him that desire without consequence is not freedom. It is a trap, because consequence is what gives desire meaning. Without the possibility of loss, gain means nothing. Without the possibility of pain, pleasure means nothing. The Nightosphere offers everything and delivers nothing, because nothing in the Nightosphere carries weight, and a weightless existence is an empty one. Finn moves through all of these kingdoms, and in each one he finds something valuable and something dangerous. And the movement itself is the philosophical education. He takes order from the Candy Kingdom, but rejects its authoritarianism. He takes passion from the Fire Kingdom but learns to temper it with wisdom. He takes the lesson of connection from the Ice Kingdom's failure of isolation. He takes the value of consequence from the Nightosphere's absence of it. And he combines all of these partial truths into a philosophy that is more complete than any single kingdom can offer. Finn's philosophy is not the Candy Kingdom, or the Fire Kingdom, or the Ice Kingdom, or the Nightosphere. It is all of them, integrated, balanced, held in tension with each other, none of them dominant, all of them present. This is the philosophical concept of synthesis, and it is the highest level of philosophical development in the Hegelian framework. Synthesis is not compromise. Synthesis is not picking the best parts of different positions and combining them. Synthesis is the creation of a new position that transcends and includes all of the positions it grew from. Finn's philosophy transcends and includes the philosophy of every kingdom he has visited. It is bigger than any of them. It is more complete than any of them. And it is uniquely his own, because no one else in Ooo has traveled through all the kingdoms, has engaged with all the philosophies, has failed in all the ways that Finn has failed, and succeeded in all the ways that Finn has succeeded. Finn's philosophy is, in the end, the philosophy of the traveler. Not the philosopher who sits in a chair and thinks about the world, the philosopher who walks through the world and thinks about what the walking reveals. The philosopher who learns not from books but from encounters, not from arguments but from experiences, not from other philosophers but from the ordinary, extraordinary act of being alive in a world that does not explain itself. And here, near the end, it is worth reflecting on the simplest and most radical thing about Finn's philosophy. He is happy. Not always. Not uninterruptedly, not in the shallow grinning way of someone who has not thought about difficult things, but fundamentally, constitutionally, at the level of his being, Finn is happy. This is radical because happiness is the thing philosophy has the most trouble explaining. Philosophers can explain suffering. Philosophers can explain duty. Philosophers can explain the structure of the moral universe and the nature of the self and the meaning of justice. But happiness, genuine happiness, the kind that survives contact with suffering and emerges intact, that is the thing philosophy has been chasing for 3,000 years and is never quite caught. Finn catches it, not by pursuing it, by practicing the things that produce it as a side effect. He practices courage, and courage produces the satisfaction of facing what frightens you. He practices compassion, and compassion produces the warmth of connecting with another person's inner life. He practices honesty, and honesty produces the relief of not having to maintain a lie. He practices love, and love produces the joy of being fully present with another being. Happiness for Finn is not a destination. It is the exhaust of a well-run engine. He does not pursue happiness. He pursues virtue. And happiness shows up uninvited, like a friend who heard you were having a party. This is Aristotle's argument exactly. Aristotle said, "Do not pursue happiness directly. Pursue the virtues. Live well. Act with courage and justice and wisdom and temperance. And happiness will follow, not because the universe rewards virtue, but because virtue is the natural activity of a well-functioning human being. and the natural activity of anything performed well produces satisfaction. A dog that runs well is a happy dog. A tree that grows well is a thriving tree. And a human who lives well, who exercises all the capacities that make a human, is a happy human. Not because happiness was the goal, because happiness is the signal that you are doing what you were made to do. Finn is doing what he was made to do. And the doing is the happiness. And the happiness is the philosophy. The show understands that this kind of happiness is not the absence of pain. Finn's happiness coexists with his suffering. He can be grieving and happy at the same time. He can be confused and happy at the same time. Because the happiness is not about what is happening to him, it is about how he is happening. It is about the quality of his engagement with reality, not the content of his circumstances. And this distinction between circumstantial happiness and constitutional happiness is the distinction that separates a shallow life from a deep one. Finn lives deeply. That is the final word. He lives deeply and he lives fully and he lives with all the mess and beauty and pain and wonder that living entails. And the depth and the fullness and the mess and the beauty and the pain and the wonder are collectively his philosophy. Not something he thinks, something he is. There is a scene in Puhoi, Season 5, Episode 16, that captures everything about Finn's philosophy in miniature. Finn enters the pillow world through a pillow fort and lives an entire life there. He grows up, he falls in love, he has children, he grows old, he dies. And then he wakes up back in the treehouse, and he has forgotten everything. The entire life, the love, the children, the aging, the death, all of it is gone. And Finn goes on with his day as if nothing happened. The surface reading is that the pillow world was a dream. The deeper reading is that the pillow world was real, and the forgetting is the tragedy, and the going on with his day is the miracle. Because Finn lost an entire lifetime, a full human life with all its richness and complexity, and he did not break. He did not collapse. He went on. Not because he is heartless, because he is Finn. And Finn goes on, always, regardless of what he has lost, regardless of what he cannot remember, regardless of what the universe takes from him. He gets up, he puts on his hat, he walks out the door, he faces the next thing. That is the philosophy of Finn the human, compressed into 22 minutes of television. You will lose everything. You will forget that you lost it, and you will keep going. Not because keeping going is rational. Not because keeping going is rewarded, because keeping going is what living things do. And Finn is a living thing, the most alive living thing in a land of Ooo, the most alive living thing in animation. And his aliveness, his stubborn, irrational, beautiful aliveness, is the philosophy, not the thinking, the living, not the argument, the life. And maybe that is the deepest thing Finn teaches you, not a philosophical concept, not a moral framework, not an argument or a thesis or a system. Just this: you will lose things. You will lose people and certainties and versions of yourself that you thought were permanent. You will lose arms and fathers and lovers and the simple moral world you grew up believing in. And the losing will hurt. It will hurt more than you expect, and it will hurt longer than you think it should. And it will hurt in places you did not know you had. But you will keep going. Not because you are brave, though you might be. Not because you are strong, though you might be that too. Because you are alive. And alive things keep going. That is what alive things do. That is what Finn does. That is what you do. Every morning, every day, every time the alarm goes off and you do not want to get up and you get up anyway. That is philosophy. That is Finn. That is you. And now let us return to where we started. Season 6, Episode 1. Finn sees his father for the first time. His face goes blank. 3 extra frames of nothing. The animators held that expression because they understood something about Finn that the rest of the series would spend years explaining. The moment when everything you thought you knew stops being true is not the end of the story. It is the beginning. The blankness is not emptiness. It is possibility. It is the space where the old understanding dies and the new understanding has not yet been born. And in that space, in that blank and terrifying gap between who you were and who you are about to become, is where philosophy lives. Finn spent 3 frames in that space. You have spent the last 2 hours in it, and neither of you came out the same person who went in. That is the power of philosophy. Not the philosophy of textbooks and lecture halls and academic journals. The philosophy of a boy and his dog in a world made of candy and fire and ice. The philosophy of paying attention. The philosophy of trying. The philosophy of getting up one more time than you fall down. If you found something here worth carrying with you, subscribing is the best way to make sure we keep going. Thank you for being here. Sleep well. I will see you in the next one.